know that, like literally everything else in this country and the country itself, that the first significant American interest groups were deeply rooted in Christianity and some other stuff.
Namely humanitarian issues such as education, slavery, and women's rights.
This concern led to the founding of numerous associations dedicated to addressing these issues. Among the first of these groups was the American Anti-Slavery Society, founded in 1833 by William Lloyd Garrison.
After that war that almost tore our country apart, Civil War, even more groups were founded.
The Women's Christian Temperance Union was created in 1874 to get rid of alcohol because it's bad. The group's activities took conventional and unconventional forms, including organizing prayer groups, lobbying for prohibition legislation, and destroying bars.
There was also the Grange, which argued that farmers' lives matter. Although its charter formally stated that the Grange was not to involve itself in politics, in 1876 it involved itself in politics, demanding that Congress gave farmers equal rights.
In the late 1800s, everything went downhill because businesses started revving up. Increasingly, large trusts, monopolies, business partnerships, and corporate conglomerations in the oil, steel, and sugar industry started to control the votes of many representatives.
The most effective organized interest of the day was the railroad industry. Yeah, remember the Credit Mobilier scandal?
That's a sister scandal.
Thus began the rise of lobbying, the act of attempting to influence actions, policies, or decisions of officials.
Suddenly, from all of the industrialization and monopolies came a whole lot of crime, poverty, unsafe working conditions, and corruption. Something had to be done. Thus, the progressive movement was born.
A bunch of new interest groups popped up and rallied for issues such as public libraries and kindergarten. To better labor conditions for workers, especially for women and children. Other groups, like the NAACP, sought to end racial inequality. Love you.
In response to the pressure applied by these progressive era groups, the government began to regulate business.
In 1886, everyone began to hate workers because of the American Federation of Labor was created, and so were labor unions. As the AFL grew in power, businesses wanted to get rid of unions, so naturally the AFL lobbied more, and eventually the Clayton Act was passed in 1914.
The Clayton Act allowed unions to organize free from persecution and also guaranteed their members' right to strike, like teachers.
Businesses felt discriminated against, so they made their own interest groups. One such group was the National Association of Manufacturers, which was founded by manufacturers who had suffered business losses in the Panic of 1893, and also because the labor unions were being mean to them.
NAM's tactics were so insistent and abrasive, and his expenditures so lavish that President Wilson was forced to say that their tactics sucked. Congress called for an investigation into NAM, but no one in Congress testified, probably because they were doing illegal things with NAM.
There was another major business organization called the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This and NAM were considered trade associations, or groups that represent a specific industry.
The progressive era resurrected in the 60s and 70s and typically represented African Americans, women, the poor, the elderly, and everyone else except rich white men.
Some old progressive groups like the NAACP and the ACLU gained renewed vigor during this time.
Vinegar.
Vinegar.
A lot of people started feeling pretty cynical about the government during this time, which they believed had failed to respond to the will of the majority. They also believed that if citizens bonded together, they could make a difference.
Two new major interest groups were formed, the Common Cause and Public Citizen. Common Cause acted as a watchdog over the federal government, and Public Citizen was founded by Ralph Nader.
Conservatives got scared of all the progressiveness, so they made their own interest groups. The Moral Majority, for example, is widely credited with assisting in Reagan's election. The Christian Coalition played an important role in Republicans winning control of Congress in 1994. The NRA said that gun lives matter.
Conservatives also thought that NAM and the Chamber of Commerce sucked, so they made groups like the Business Roundtable, which urged its members to engage in direct lobbying to influence the course of politics.
Labor unions got really popular toward the end of the Great Depression. By then, organized labor began to wield potent political power as it was able to get its members to support certain candidates, typically Democrats.
1955, the AFL merged with the Congress of Industrial Organizations and started yelling at the government that workers' lives matter.